Yes, we are back. What is happening, Pod Gang? My name is Emil Walker, and you are listening to Inside the Ride, a podcast that dives deep into conversations with fascinating people about the highs and lows of their journey towards purpose. I am currently sat in my car pretty much under the runway of an airport in Milan, so it's not been that easy to get the audio right, so I'm going to have to try and spin through this before another plane flies over. My guest today is Henry Jackson James, better known as HJJ All Day. Yes, he is from Newcastle, and no, my Geordie accent is not very convincing. He's an awesome human being and a good friend of mine, as I mentioned, originally from up north, but now resides in not so sunny London. By profession, he works in graphic design and branding, which we discuss quite a lot in the podcast. We live in an age now where almost everything is affected by some sort of branding. So it was interesting to get his take on what the hell is going on from a sort of insider's perspective. He's an extremely well-read guy with an extensive amount of knowledge and opinions on pretty much everything. Some things that we discuss, though, are the environment, world politics, social and religious issues.
The systematic oppression and repression of women and homosexuals, which is massively changing like our country and notable other countries, and has got worse in other countries around the world. That's going to be an interesting battle for the foreseeable future. I'm maybe too idealistic or naive that I always think good ideas are going to win in the end.
Sometimes they do.
History doesn't actually teach us that necessarily, but I like to think that like really bad ideas just can't survive that long.
Henry is also a rapper and a poet, and I was hoping to talk to him more about his new releases and also the music industry, but sadly time got ahead of us and we ended up chatting about some really important stuff like the Kardashians instead. Don't worry though, this was only about 5 minutes towards the beginning of the conversation, and it does get better, I promise. In fact, I would actually say in the 20-something episodes I've done so far, this has definitely been one of my favourite ones, and I hope to lock in another one with Henry again sometime soon to chat about all the stuff that we missed this time round. In other news, check it out. We got a new theme tune. Massive shouts to Jackie Marua, who also happens to be a mutual friend of mine and Henry's. This one is a banger. Mate, we're live.
We're live.
We're rolling.
Check it. Inside the Ride live.
How are you? What's going on?
I'm fantastic, Emil. It's great to see you. Thank you very much for having me on this.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to your little studio. Pretty jealous of this. I'm just listening through the headphones and the audio sounds much better than a lot of the audio on the other podcasts.
Yeah, we're surrounded by grey spaceship foam, and whether not just the audio difference, it just makes you feel better. It just puts you in a good vibe for recording when you're surrounded by grey foam rather than wallpaper.
Is it because it doesn't bounce your voice back at you when you're talking?
Yeah, and it just makes you feel like you're in a spaceship, so you can just do those interstellar bars, you know.
So you just moved in here. What's it been like making tunes in your new studio?
It's been good. It's been really good. The first one of the tunes I just made actually was not even me making it. I recorded my friend in it and engineered it, and it was like a battle rap diss reply because someone had been racist to him, and it was like a racist rapper, which I didn't really realise existed in hip-hop at all. And it was like, so he'd had to reply to a racist, which was pretty crazy. And we did that, and it turned out really good. And that, hearing someone else's voice in it rather than my own, was the first time I was like, yeah, this actually sounds really nice, this room. Like, I have done it out all right.
Has the racist rapper done a response?
No, and I don't think he should ever go near a microphone ever again in his life. He was totally body bagged, and yeah, it was a game over. 90 bro, Rizwan Youssef body bagged him, and that should just stay that way forever.
That's crazy. I didn't realise there was like, well, of course there is. There's racists everywhere, but
Yeah, that's what happens back up in the northeast. Apparently, keep it giving us a bad reputation. It's like,
oh, is it? So it's rappers from your hometown?
Yeah, Geordie rappers. Well, yeah, from Sunderland and Newcastle, I think. Yeah, crazy.
What's it like being in London then? Do you prefer living in London to Geordie land?
I love London. I absolutely love London. I've been here like 10 years now. My sister moved to London when I was in college, and she never came back. She's still in London now. And I went back to Newcastle after I came to university here, and then went back to Newcastle for a few years. And once I'd came here, it was like, what's that sort of saying? If your mind's expanded with an idea, you can never go back. It's like, it was a bit like that. I love my friends and I love my family, but once there's just so much culture here, and the things I love doing, music, skating, graphics. I mean, the primary reason I was here was for work, because there wasn't graphic design jobs in the Northeast. So it was very selfish in that respect to chase a career and chase some money. But everything else that came with it was here. And I wouldn't change it, man. I also think, where else would I ever go in the world? And it's like, I still haven't been to New York, which I hear is like such a similar city, but there's just so much going on and so much always happening. Like, I've never felt bored for a half second. So it's nice to get out sometimes. Like, we were just talking before about going to Devon and just seeing rolling hills. And
I don't think I've been to Newcastle,
Yeah.
Actually, tell a lie, I went once on a school trip, and I just remember going to a swimming pool, and there was like 400 chavs there.
That sounds like the worst school trip ever. I used to go on school trips to London, and that was the thing. And it's like, and this is where I need to be.
We went to Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
And then, so it would have been that trip. But it was because I'm from Devon. I was like, just there weren't that many chavs. And we got there and I was like, I don't even think we had a word for chavs because we were so young. And like chav wasn't, it was maybe kevs.
Kevs, that's a good one. We call chavs charvers or chavs, and it just has the R. And I always think that's really ironic because everything in London, they put an R in where it's not there. So they'll say grass and bath, and they put an R in everything that just has an A. And
that's a good point.
And we have one word where I say chavs. It is ironically, it's like the one word I'd say where I sound posh. Do you know what I mean? It's like me coming out and saying bath. The charvers, Geordie tends to be very phonetic, so people say things that they've read a lot more. It's not like there's this lost that concept of like what proper English is.
Geordie's quite a kind of unique culture, almost, isn't it? I feel like when I'm with a Geordie and there's like another Geordie turns up, it's almost like people at a fight club or something. It's like a little nod, like yeah.
I didn't ever appreciate it till I left, which is really, really, really interesting. When I was younger and in college and stuff, I planned my exodus. I was in art college. I did my A-levels and then I went to art college in Newcastle. And it's just hard to explain, especially like with me, I was like massively into hip-hop. And my entire, through school, I was just always just wigger was the word I heard all the time, And it's just like this concept of you want to be black or like the other or that, just such a homogenous society. And then you go to London and you just realise that man, it's just people are people and there's people everywhere and there's culture and you can be yourself. And
there's a lot of different people, isn't there, in London?
Yeah. Newcastle's changed a lot now. There's a lot more going on and it's opened up a lot, I think. But I didn't really answer your question at all. I don't know, what is the culture like? It's quite funny because I think people generally have a good sense of humour because it's quite it can be quite abrasive. So as a place, it can be very rough around the edges, and it builds this sort of character in people that's kind of you're a bit ready for whatever. And you kind of like to turn situations into humour because it's obviously very working class culture. So a lot of people who don't really have much. And obviously there is a big partying and drinking culture and people really enjoying
just
themselves.
Just everywhere in the UK.
But that is such a UK thing, yeah. That you get that everywhere you go. But it is funny because it's interesting you said you went to a school trip. Everyone who says they've been to Newcastle to me just says, I've been on a night out. And it's usually places I would have never went when I was growing up, you know. Never would have ventured to the Tiger or all these places. I just stayed away, and it's like, oh, you went on a Hindu, did you? And you went to Tiger. Awesome. Like, that is not the Newcastle I know at all. I was probably at the skate park. Like, yeah.
Geordie Shore's from Newcastle, it must be.
Yeah, that kicked off when I was at university. And it was weird because loads of people used to come and talk to me about it, and I didn't used to watch it. And it was like, again, a side of Newcastle that didn't ever resonate with me. It was never part of me. It is definitely something that existed and I was aware of. And I think it's a really weird one of life imitating art in a way. Not that I call Geordie Shore art, but I think when these people all got on TV and they had like the tangerine tans and they were all like, had a certain look and like guys with plucked eyebrows, like that. Occasionally. Nah, man. But then it's like, then you'd go and you'd start seeing all of these people like this. And it was weird because I'd been in London and then I come back and suddenly everyone looks like these Geordie Shore sort of caricatures, which I'd never seen before, or I'd seen in such moderation, let's say. And it was suddenly so prevalent everywhere you look.
I wonder how like people look back on this age that we're in now with like Geordie Shore and the Kardashians and stuff, because it's all documented. Like, it's all going to be available in history archives. I wonder what they're going to think of us.
I think a lot of it will be forgotten. I think when you look at how much information people take in, and even the concept of like a reality show, it's such a time killer as opposed to something of such high substance. I'm not like here going to slate the Kardashians or anything like that. Like,
I mean, they've made more money than
yeah,
most people on the planet.
But it's a model of, I think there's this certain model which is very new, which is alien to a lot of people. I used to hear it from a lot of people, like parents who say, why do kids watch videos of people playing computer games and not playing themselves? And a lot of it's to do with connection and finding personalities that people can resonate with. So say a young girl finds Kim Kardashian this sort of role model, or not even necessarily a role model, but just someone she enjoys listening to or finds humorous or whatever. It's like this false sort of friendship where essentially these people feel a connection to something. And it's not that the content has to be, it's not like writing a book where you read some like amazing literature where someone's like crafted every word and it's all been edited and it's all there to tell a very specific story. It's just life being documented. It's like glimpsing into someone else's life. It's like, and I think it will be kind of taken as such. You are along on the journey or you're not, you know? Like, I'm not. I don't think I've ever seen an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, you know? Kind of wanted to see one if Kanye was in it to see what that happens, and apparently he's not in it. So I was like, but
it's keeping up. It is a glimpse into someone's life, but it's also it's like fictional. It's like docu-fictional because it's reality TV, but it's not real.
Yeah, I do wonder as well whether people understand now how fake reality TV is. And I feel like a lot of people know and don't care, and they appreciate that it is.
And they even like want to watch it even more.
Yeah, and they're like either it's either that like don't kill the illusion, like the magician thing. So it's like we don't want to know behind the scenes because if I know how the trick works, it isn't as interesting. I want to be shocked. Or it's kind of it's just this sort of acceptance. The people who think it's rubbish and fake don't watch it, you know.
But it's the same with Instagram and stuff. There's like this brand that people are creating for themselves now. And we chatted about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And it's like, at what point is somebody themselves, where's the separation between who they are and this like brand? Like, which part do they actually identify with? And
also, just before we go into it further, I think sometimes people start believing their own bullshit. So it's like, when does it happen where if you start acting like this and this is your persona, that can't not then start invading your actual real life? You can be an actor in one sense and you can act and then turn it on and off for the show or the camera. But if this is a way you start acting all of the time and this is a way you start to present in yourself, that then becomes a part of your identity. So even if there's a fake element, you could say, or an element that's purposely there for camera, it's became a part of your identity. If you don't differentiate for this being a character and being you, then the character you're playing is you, which is the bizarre line.
Yeah, and then you just fall into constantly playing someone else.
Yeah.
And I mean, I heard that happen like with Johnny Depp when he was playing Captain Jack Sparrow. Like he just merged into this person in real life almost.
Yeah. Method acting's pretty fascinating as well. Yeah. But when we were talking about branding and brand identity, that's a lot of what I do at work. So I work for a branding agency, and brand now is so much more understood, and understood more by so many younger people than it ever was. And it's interesting, I talk to my parents about, they remember the introduction of brands. So you used to go into a shop and it was your local clothes shop, whatever, and you'd have all your different pairs of jeans. And you would choose a pair of jeans that fit you best, or that you liked the most for whatever reason, or was similar to what you saw someone else who was wearing them and they were similar to the ones that
massive
you liked.
flares.
Yeah. But you were like, I want the bell bottoms, I want the flares. That's what you go in for. And it didn't matter what label it was attached to that. I mean, labels did exist at this point, but it wasn't within. A lot of people couldn't afford it, or it wasn't prevalent enough to people understand that. But now brand is everywhere, and it's so attached to decision, and it's so attached to psychology in everything we do. And it's this idea now that we very much understand and appreciate the world of brands as products, as in the clothes you wear, the foods you eat, and the things you purchase there. But this idea now that everyone sells themselves, so everyone's Instagram, for example, your social media account is your personal brand. And some people have a very acute awareness of this, and they do it very smartly. Some people subconsciously do it brilliant and don't even realize it, but their personalities are so interesting that they're interesting brands without realizing it. Some people try to make fake brands that fail terribly. And it's just this really interesting situation of how people try to market themselves, and how to try and we all have an identity, and everyone's identity is hugely important to them, and how other people perceive you and how you perceive yourself, which is intrinsically linked. But this idea that you have to choose which bits of your identity to portray, I find that so fascinating. Like, I use social media not that heavily, and I'm not very good at it, and I have to force myself to use it, but I do it very shamelessly in terms of like things I want to promote, and I'm very aware, and I'm a very private person, so I don't show a lot of pictures of my family, my girlfriend. I do show some on occasions I feel where it's fit, but I don't flaunt it, I wouldn't say. Or I don't flaunt any of my possessions. Like, you haven't seen it, we're talking about my new house. You might have seen that I've got a house, but you wouldn't know like any of the rooms. No one knows what my bedroom looks like.
Yeah. But some people are like dying to share that with everyone, all these people they don't know instantly. Like almost before they want to show their closer friends.
And this is again the level, like, is that so natural to you that that's your personality coming out? Or are you trying to curate your own identity of what you see?
Is there like, because branding is your kind of background, is there things that you see from people that are perhaps trying to come off as authentic and subliminal, but you're like, I see you, I see what you're doing here. This is like, there's a play behind this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's very obvious and people get spotted out. But sometimes I wonder if some people like don't even mind. Like, I think people are so used to advertising now that people can advertise in such a shameless way that you can be laughed at, and it's worked just because you got the attention. Like, everything's attention is the currency on social media. There's no other currency but that.
Yeah, even if people get bad press, it's still promotion, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I always remember Kanye West said something, and he said, I don't care whether people love me or hate me as long as they're talking about me. And that summed up and nailed Kanye West for me, because everyone he's been through his stages, and I'm sure a lot of people I love the college dropout. Oh yeah, but he's lost his mind, he's crazy. And I just was like, when you realise that like that's how he thinks, if you're saying he's done this and he's mad, I'm just thinking you're talking about him and that's all he wants. He wants all the headlines. And then
Same with Trump.
that's exactly it. It's the exact same effect. It's like the whole idea that there's no such thing as bad press. Attention's a currency. Are you talking about me? Everyone wants to write 1,000 articles slandering him, but they're not even realising that they're just ignoring the other person. You're not here talking about policies. You're acting like he's the big bad wolf, but you're not talking about the detail. You just care about the headlines.
It's like how I fully believe that Trump believes that climate change is a real thing, but if he was to just kind of acknowledge it, I don't think he would be as in the media for the people who are pro climate change, if that makes sense.
You don't think he believes it's a hoax made up by the Chinese?
What's that?
That's what he tweeted, yeah.
Oh,
Climate change
God.
is a hoax invented by the Chinese government. I
Yeah, and
think.
then how much press around the world is that going to get? Like, how much attention is he going to get from that?
I think it's, you know where his priorities lie, in which is that he's there to, he's a megalomaniac. He wants to be famous and he wants to be powerful and rich. And I think he's so shameless about that he'll lie in front of everyone to attain those goals. And it's worked. And it's like everyone's lost. Like, it's pretty bizarre. But what his idea of winning is what he's achieved. I don't think he really... It's the same way someone else could have... you have like 100 nice comments and then one bad one.
That's the one that keeps you up all night.
That's the one that keeps you up at night. I think he's the type of person where he could have 100 people saying bad things about him, and he just has to have one person say he's right, and he's just like, yeah, I am right. Because Alex Jones says I'm right. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if like all of these other newspapers say that this is a terrible idea. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of my logic in it. I wouldn't even try and step inside his brain for a second.
Do you think branding plays a huge part in politics then, and how?
It's so integral to it. Like, the American politics it happens in Britain too, but we're really bad at it because we have loads of other barriers in the way, and there's so many details of sort of the House of Lords and things, and it's so hierarchical, and there's so many like insider clubs. Now in America you have all of this and you have the huge amounts of party funding, but you have this like we totally live in this soundbite era. And the strange thing is we always have to a degree, because people used to have so much less information than they ever have, but now we have more information than ever, but so much disinformation and so much overload that people have to latch on to the smallest things. So it's all about identity and identity politics, and which is one of the most dangerous things ever, because you should never, if you can walk in anywhere and say like, this is my political opinion and I'm never unswaying from it, and then someone comes out with a policy that's completely against what you actually believe in, but you'll go with them because you already have identified yourself as this, it's a really dangerous position. And that's what so many people are doing. I mean, it's typical. It's not even. It's usually it's typical of like young people to be idealists like that, but then you also hear old people set in their ways. It's just across the board, people are seeing this more as an identity thing than actually what are the facts, what's going on, what's the best course to plan for society and humanity, and if we want to sustain human life on Earth. No one goes in it with that rationale. They go in with like, well, what will my family think? What will my friends think? Do I like this guy? Do I not? He said this. These are the buzz points that I care about. But yeah, it's.
And for like every article that you read that sways into your favour, there's like another 10 out there that try and pull your mind elsewhere. So I can understand why people go with what their family think or their friends think and aren't looking at this stuff for themselves.
Well, it's confirmation bias. So we tend to read the books, the articles, listen to the things that we know we enjoy and like, and with people who agree with us. Not many people. I do it, and I do it not on a huge scale to purposely try and listen to people's opinions that are my own. And honestly, so many times I find them absolutely repulsive and repugnant that I just feel like it's an exercise in learning how to argue with these people better, or make a point to ignore them and keep them out of my life. Which is not really the approach you should have, but it's...
I don't know. It seems like a pretty good approach, because then you're not just filling your kind of, what's the term for it, where you're just in like a...
In the bubble.
In the bubble, yeah. In like the washing machine of just like singing to the choir, preaching to the choir.
I think it's important to confront your own biases. And it's very, very difficult to do, because it's really upsetting when you realise things about yourself. I think, a thing I've been thinking about a lot, and it kind of went off on a tangent from the branding of politics. I'm not an expert in political branding by any means. I mean, but
you'll have a stab at it.
Actually, I did work on a job. I don't know if I should say this, but we worked on a job that was to do with
Brexit.
It was.
Was it actually?
But yeah.
Is it all your fault that we're leaving the EU?
Well, it was at my last agency. I didn't actually work on the job at all, but our agency did, and it was to do with getting young people to vote, and to vote to stay in the European Union. And to say it got harangued as a campaign is an understatement. It was mauled. Which was, I think it was, again, not even that the work was really bad. It was just from such an ideological standpoint that because it was the government that they had in trying to pander to the youth, it was like there's nothing a conservative government could try and do to appeal to a young market to then come off as credible. And the irony was, it was like on Twitter that people were saying like, acting as if it's like, oh yeah, I'm down with the kids and I'm young, like who came up with this, some like 50-year-old bloke or whatever. And it wasn't like the guys who came up with it were like, you know, young guys like me, like in their 20s, young guys trying to appeal to a youth market and do it. And it's just you couldn't get past that. It's such an institution and there's such an identity about being a Tory that it's just like you can't have Theresa May trying to tell like the youth to vote. It's just like it just didn't work at all.
Yeah, I wonder what's going to happen with it all. It feels like we need a campaign to get our government to sort their lives out. Yeah,
Brandon's really funny, and design and advertising, they're all... There's a phrase, remember J.K. Rowling in this great speech? You ever hear her Harvard speech that you did?
The commencement speech.
Yeah.
I think you might have actually sent it to me. Yeah, I did watch it a few years ago.
She says one line in it, and she says, she calls the magic in Harry Potter morally neutral. And it's like what you can do with it. And like Star Wars, you know, the Force you can be with the dark side, or you can be with the light side. And I sort of think like branding, advertising, we often see them as being used for bad. But that's only in the context of like corporations who have a lot of money are using these techniques to make a lot of money. Now, in exactly the same sense, it's like there's so much that is branding and advertising on all sorts of scales. Like you handing out your flyer to your local karate lesson is advertising, you know, and the logo name you've created for yourself is your brand. It's across everything, like the sign on your local butcher, whether it's a beautiful painted sign, which then denotes that there's some sort of heritage in it, whether it's a family business or that there's some authority there or expertise because it's this beautiful painted sign. That's branding, you know. We just see it because, you know, in a capitalist society with so much money going around, the big dogs have the big money, so they can be more places and all over. And when you think about things like branding in a political sense, it's like it can be used for so much damage and so much bad to sway people down paths that I don't think are right. I think there's going to be a huge revolution in packaging, and it seems to be a thing that I mean, I say all people talk about. I mean, I work in a bloody design company, so I'm not the best example, but I still
Put
feel
yourself
like
out of work.
everyone. I mean, we don't do packaging design, so I'm not sweating it too much. But this whole agency's dedicated to that, you know. But I think I call it the Attenborough effect, like how much people detest plastic at the moment.
Just from that one episode on the Blue Planet.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing. Also, I think it's, again, people attach emotions to things. So if you think because David Attenborough told you plastic's really bad and you realise you can recycle plastic quite easily, that's a huge... You can make a change across a culture very easily there. Or not necessarily easily, but I'm sure a lot more people recycle plastic now than... I was listening to the podcast you did with your friend recently, and he was saying how bad flying was. Now, the amount of work you'd have to do to change views on flight, like, you honestly tell me people are going to give up their like holiday once a year?
Well, I think they're gonna start taxing it like crazy, because I didn't realize until doing that podcast quite how bad flying actually is. He was saying that we use a flight to America is about 5 tons of carbon, and we need to be getting down to consuming or using 1 ton of carbon per person per year. So just a flight to America is your 5 years of carbon. And I think if the government start to realize just how bad flying is, like, they're just going to put this huge carbon tax on flights. So it'll be like thousands to fly.
Is that per flight per plane or per individual on the flight?
Per person.
That's incredible. I mean, get your cheap flights in while they're happening, you know?
But it's crazy. We were saying, it's like, I live in London. My family lives 4 hours away, 3 hours away by train. I can fly to like Spain for 30 quid, or I get a train down to Devon for 60.
Yes,
like, what?
It's nuts. Well, I have friends who live in Portugal who can get to Lisbon cheaper and faster than I can get to Newcastle on the train. They can get an EasyJet over there for like 40, 50 quid, whereas it cost me £150 return, 3 hours to get to Newcastle. It's an interesting one there, because I think technology then has to step up. So it's like, you shouldn't be burning fossil fuels like that. I mean, I have no idea how far away it is from electronic flight, or, you know what I mean? But we're seeing all the electronic cars come in. The thing is the market leads this, and what people see as appealing and what's attractive to them has a huge impact on people's decisions.
And that kind of ties back into the branding. It's like, how glossy and attractive and like personable can you make a campaign? Like the straws thing, it's like...
Well, think of what electronic cars used to be perceived as. It used to be the sort of, oh, you've got that, it's like this rubbish car, it's like
Slow.
the hybrid or the cool... And like now all of a sudden I'm seeing these like BMWs and these
the
new
police
Audis,
cars.
And they've got like, I've just watched the Avengers the other day, and the product placement with the Audis, and Tony Stark's over here in like a blued out BMW electronic vehicle, and it's like, well, the Avengers have got them. Like, it's a total culture shift in such a short time. I think this is an interesting like identity and branding one as well, which is generally the environmental movement, because there's a scientist and author I hold in the highest regard, called James Lovelock, who lives in Devon. I think he's about 99 now. I was trying to find out his address to read him a letter, and it turns out it's really hard to find people's, like, get a hold of some people. I'd love to write him a letter, but he developed what's called the Gaia hypothesis, or Gaia theory, which is now mainstream science in schools of what they call Earth system science.
I know this guy because I've read an article.
I thought you were going to just know him as in I know him in Devon. I'm seeing him down the pub.
I recognise it because he's done like quite a few predictions that have come true, and he's done some crazy prediction for like 10 years from now or something. Is that right?
He thinks we're just already well past the edge.
Yeah,
he thinks we've just like totally passed the turning point. So he invented the electron capture device. So he was the one who discovered CFCs in the atmosphere. And realised,
CFCs? I know, I sound stupid asking that probably.
Chlorofluorocarbons. So it's basically, you know, when people would say don't spray your deodorants outside because you're damaging the atmosphere.
Oh, do they say that? I use roll-on, so I'm safe.
Safe. Which actually leads on to, someone just showed me a full sort of total vegan, plastic-free deodorant, and they're doing them with shower things. This is a whole new way market that's going to now become trendy. But this is sort of what I was getting at, which is people's perception of what the green movement is. And I think there's a few interesting distinctions, but just to stay on James Lovelock for a second, he basically proposed this theory. And it's turned out to a lot of it to be really solid science, that the Earth is a self-regulating organism. So the Earth will bring itself into balance to sustain life. Now, a lot of people really don't understand environmental issues from a position of solipsism or self-centeredness for our species, which is that a lot of people think like we're hurting the planet or hurting the Earth. And it's like, oh, but we're damaging the Earth and we're chopping down the rainforest and stuff. And it's like, man, the Earth does not care. Like, we could do whatever we want. We could set off every nuke on the planet tomorrow and blow up the Earth. Like, the Earth will be around in a billion years.
Well, it's us and the animals that we're essentially destroying.
Exactly. But like, the Earth itself, like, will always create new life. Life comes in so many forms, like so many species of flora, fauna, like it'll always evolve and develop new things. The Earth's designed to sustain life. Like, not necessarily ours though, and that's the point, you know?
We're kind of on this power trip that like the Earth is ours and like we own it, and like we're trying to protect what belongs to us, but actually like we're like the animals, we just happen to be at the top of the food chain. Like.
100%, we're the apex predator, you know? That's what we are. And it's this idea that that the green movement's not that I'm like, sounds like I'm just shitting all over it, which in a way I am, because it's misguided. It's a fundamental communication error, which is that we're doing this to be good with the environment, and we're doing it to live symbiotically with the environment, which is what we should be doing, really. But as if this is a thing that's going to make like the planet happy, you know, that if we can like save some more elephants, like the planet will be happy and everything will go back to balance. It's like, no, we're just trying to make sure we like keep our species here and that we can survive, and that we can, which is biologically what we're designed to do, you know, just keep procreating, make sure you have progeny. That's a sort of game here. And I think we're at a really interesting turning point where what the green movement used to be is sort of the typical Woodstock hippies, to now like the huge influx of people being aware of like how veganism affects your carbon footprint and like not taking flights, with realizing that this is going to help your children have a better life and help your great grandkids and sustain future generations. It's a completely different story and narrative, you know, from the tree hugger to the let's make sure scientific advancement and music and art and human creation and thought lives on. That's a totally different story and picture. And we're in this amazing transitional point that's caught between these two worlds. That's this sort of like, there's this sort of fake green element to it, which is like, let's be good to the planet and stop this. When really it's like, we just want to survive here, man. We want to do this. And I don't think I've articulated that in the best way, but it's not as clear cut as everyone thinks. And also what's an amazing thing that just fascinates me is this to do with information, but what issues are most important, how people decide them. So like I said, the Attenborough effect, like everyone will recycle plastic because it's so easy now, you know. Most people won't even like do it properly or like rinse their stuff out, but it's like you chuck it in the recycling bin, cool. But you're saying that like taking a flight, it has such a different impact on the environment than your plastic bottles do.
A lot of it's visual though, isn't it? It's like this out of sight, out of mind thing is exactly how everyone lives. It's like I wouldn't get all the rubbish out of my bin and go and dig a hole in my garden and bury it, but that's essentially where it's going.
Yeah.
Like that would seem crazy to me, to chuck a load of plastic and stuff under the soil, but like we don't see that. We just put it in a bin, a wheelie bin. The bin man picks it up, and then it's gone out of our lives, and we can just go on with everything else we're doing.
100%. Well, people people connect with stories. Like facts are only great if they make a good story, you know? So facts are only interesting if I can tell you it and you can visualize it, and it essentially becomes a story. But what people do is they connect with stories and ideas, and then you just have to have the facts to back them up. And the facts can be true or false, you know? You could be buying something that you think's ethical and friendly, and it makes you feel good about yourself because you'd be making that decision week in, week out, buying your roll-on instead of your spray. And you can do that and feel good about yourself. Now, it could turn out you're wrong the whole time, and what they've been making the roll-ons out of is like frog venom or something, and you've been murdering all these frogs. I don't know. But like you buy into the story, you know? You're not buying into the facts. We don't have time to go. You're not about to start picking up scientific journals to find out whether these roll-ons are made out of frog venom.
Just get down your local library, trying to educate yourself a bit on the frog venom.
Yeah.
So I was chatting to this guy he kind of like does vision quests and stuff. I don't know what you would really call him. A healer, a mind healer. And he's writing a book about consciousness. And he kind of has this idea, there's like this big sense of consciousness that the world has, but we can't all tap into it. And he has this idea that now we have the internet, we are kind of tapping into it. And I mean, it kind of shows how like meditation's like cool and trendy, and like people are like meditating. And he was like, that is what's going to fix the planet, is people kind of coming in tune as like a collective whole, kind of in a spiritual sense. I'm just wondering where you kind of stand with that.
Yeah, I've definitely heard and read some people on this. Probably Graham Hancock, who had the famous banned TED Talk and the War on Consciousness. A lot of people it comes to is his like sort of 5E MOT, DMT and ayahuasca and all this. Is that how he accesses it, or through psilocybin and magic mushrooms?
I don't think he does, but I might be completely wrong.
Yeah. I think the metaphors, the internet as a global consciousness is 100% true. It is. It connects us all, and it's all this information we store online. Probably more like the Matrix. And
we're actually plugged in.
Yeah, we're creating this whole network there that's, again, sort of I think the internet's like, it's like that magic. It's morally neutral. It could be used for good, it can be used for bad. A lot of people, I find it funny, like just say examples people say about like, oh, I think social media is really bad, even though everyone uses it. And people say, oh, I just see all this rubbish on my Facebook or Twitter. And I'm like, you choose who to look at that, you know? Mine's full of like boxing news and music about artists and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not seeing this stuff you're seeing. I'm just finding out who's fighting tonight. I don't know, like you get to choose that. And I think the internet's the same. I'm sure some people do some dark things on it, literally on the dark web, but people can do good things. I love a guy called Sam Harris. That sound where I said that might sound. He's an author and a neuroscientist. I love his work.
I recognise the name. I think I might have heard him on a podcast.
He has a fantastic podcast which has recently been rebranded as Making Sense with Sam Harris. It was previously called the Waking Up Podcast. He did a book on spirituality without religion.
Called, yeah. That's why I've got it written down. I haven't read the book, but I've heard it's good.
I think it's called Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion is the subtitle. Sam Harris is a fascinating guy. He was one of the new atheists, which was Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Dan Dennett, and Sam Harris. And they all brilliant writers for different reasons, and I would recommend them all for very different reasons. Dan Dennett, amazing sort of modern philosopher. Christopher Hitchens, probably the most eloquent orator that's ever lived. And if you haven't heard him speak and want advice on speaking and talking and arguing, there's none surpass Christopher Hitchens. Richard Dawkins, one of the best science educators, and his books, if you want to understand the origin of not just human life, but all life on Earth, just the best writer on it I've read. I mean, things like his book, The Blind Watchmaker, completely blew away my understanding of evolution and biology. But all of them had the common thread, including Sam Harris, who's great on I haven't not read much of his stuff on neuroscience, but great in the way that people think and believe. Even though they all have different things to write on. Again, Hitchens used to be a brilliant journalist and wrote things about war and polemics against all different figures, very controversial books on how terrible Mother Teresa was and things, But
there's always a hater out there.
Yeah, their common thread was that they were the new atheists and they all were against religion and against the belief in the scriptures that adhere to a supernatural deity, namely the three large monotheisms, Christianity, Judaism and Islam, and all see them as false or negatable, which is completely the position have stood in since I'm a very, very, not a young man, a young boy. I've never believed in any organised religion. So Sam Harris was known for this, but he also is, he was quite into Buddhism, but he is really into meditation. And he's got a great meditation app as well, actually. And he wrote a book, which is how, I actually really think the word spirituality is just like one of the most loaded words in the English lexicon. Like, you say that, I feel like it's one of those words where it means a different thing to every person, or also has a very cliched meaning, but also has a meaning that everyone relates to, but it's so hard to separate the two.
Yeah, and there's not really too many words that you can replace it with. It's like, are you religious?
He actually says that at the beginning of the book, and he chooses to use spirituality and says, why? Sorry for cutting you up.
That's right, yeah, no, because you can be, I feel like you can be completely spiritual without having a faith, without having a religion. But there isn't too many words to, it's like a buzzword at the moment, isn't it? Everyone's tapping into their spiritual side.
I think so. My beliefs in that sense would be, well, one is that there's obviously altered states of consciousness that psychedelics, psychotropics can affect your brain, I have tried drugs before, and I know that they alter your state of consciousness.
Do they turn you into a Christian, though?
They definitely didn't. I do have an interest in one about sort of, I got spiked once when I was younger, and for that reason, I've never, wouldn't go close to hallucinogenics. But I know a lot of people have these visions and things, and it's a very popular thing. And Joe Rogan always goes on about DMT and stuff.
Yeah.
But there might be something in that. I'm definitely not against that or researching that, and I think prohibition is definitely a roadblock in that. Whether it's a huge conspiracy and they're trying to stop people doing it. I don't know if I think it's more money and greed and interest. But
then also kind of going back to what you're saying about people complaining about their newsfeed on social media being crap, it's like, we're all human. If there wasn't prohibition on it, there's going to be a huge amount of people that completely disrespect it.
Yeah. Look, we need laws and rules. And it's like how we complain about our government and how bad they are with Brexit. Yeah, they're doing a bad job, but we're not in a theocratic religious state where you're not allowed to believe different things or don't have freedom of speech to any degree. So it's like there's levels to this, right?
Yeah.
There's levels to everything. When it comes to the spirituality side of it, I think there's things to me that are very spiritual experiences, which might not sound as such, but I rollerblade, inline skate, and have for years, and that to me is like one of the best forms of meditation. And that when I skate, I can go into the zone, people call it, or the flow state. Have you heard that one people have been using? Yeah. A lot of you hear that from surfers or athletes. I'm in the flow state, and musicians, I do that when I rap, when I'm on stage. I can definitely get in these states. And for me, how I tap into that consciousness, into a different state, is my artistic pursuits and my physical pursuits. So definitely skating. When I'm rapping, when I'm writing, they're the main two. But then also I think my general view is that there's always more to learn, and there's way more that we don't know than we do know. So I think I'm not as smart as these scientists, and if I was, I'd be out here doing physics and biology, not writing raps and going out skating. But can't all have it, you know what I mean, right?
Well, they probably can't skate, so
I bet they can't, you know what I mean? I never heard Stephen Hawkins drop a mixtape. That's all I'm saying. But I find those areas of pursuit amazing to read. From my layman's understanding, I love reading about space and what's out there. And I think just to know that people are constantly pushing these frontiers. And one thing James Lovelock says as well is like people now conflate science with technology. So it's not always just about technology getting better. It's just science for the sake of science, just learning about the world, learning about the universe.
That's it. There's people like how you feel like you're in a meditative state when you're doing something like skating or rapping on stage. You're so in the moment because you're so into it. There's probably someone sitting at their computer doing some space science stuff who's in exactly the same
100%.
flow state.
100%. It's being so focused and so engaged in something that you're simultaneously completely concentrated and attuned to what you're doing, and at the same time you're so concentrated on that you're free from all other thoughts, and it's like the purest moment you can be in, because that deep intense level of focus starts to feel like there isn't any focus. It's like it dissolves into just complete doing, which is what meditation is, you know? I mean, I don't meditate or practice meditation much, but I understand what it is and what it's meant to be, mainly from learning from Sam Harris. I don't actually have an excuse why I don't meditate much. It just have way more things I prioritize, which is the truth about everything, right? You don't find time, you make it. I kind of believe that. But I understand that it's about... I'll tell you where I do meditate. I'm not very good at getting to sleep. And I know in the first stages of meditation, as you say, you just focus on your breath. And I'll do that at night. When I go to bed at night, like I have so many thoughts racing, and it's that voice in your head can often be negative, you know, looking back on the events you've done the day and did you do that well or not, or what am I do tomorrow, or panicking about all the things you haven't done. And if I get into that state where it's negative thinking, or if it's hyper ego, or if it's like thinking that, yeah, I'm going to do this and it's really good, and you need to give your ego a check sometimes, I just try and focus on like, just think about breathing. Just think about the moment. You're in bed here, you're lying down, everything's okay. You've made it this far. You're happy. You're in your house. You're in your home. You're not in a war zone. Just breathe and feel the moment. You don't have to be thinking about the next TV show to watch. You don't have to be thinking about tomorrow at work. You don't have to think about anything but the moment. And that's one of the most powerful spiritual, in, not that you can see my fingers, but in the quote marks, it's like one of the most powerful spiritual things to do is to be completely tapped into the moment. But it's also the fact that it's untenable to your full life. You can't go through life completely in the moment. You know, I know Jesus said spare no thought for tomorrow, but we all have to save, we all have to plan, we all have to make decisions that affect other people around us. And I think spirituality is that balance of what, like, working out, one, how to live in your society and how to be the best human being, but finding something that changes your mental state to something that you feel pushes you further than you've ever been before, a place that you've never taken yourself mentally before, and often doing something that you've never done physically before is a quick way of doing it.
It's just kind of checking yourself as well. Like because I meditate, well, pretty much every day, but I do it as soon as I wake up, because then it's just, I don't have to like make time for it. Like I know when I wake up, like that's when it's going to happen. But then it's concentrating on your breathing, but just checking that voice in your head, that voice that's always like, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do in an hour? What am I going to do in 5 minutes? And then getting your phone out and just racing through the apps. And it's just like putting a halt on that, putting a stop on that, and so I do that in the morning, but then kind of throughout the day, if I'm like, oh, my heart's beating, I'm stressed, I've got too many things to do, my to-do list is getting bigger rather than smaller, I'm like, just stop. And that, like, just for a couple of minutes, I think that makes all the difference.
Did you teach yourself to meditate, or how did you learn to meditate?
I started using Headspace, that app was pretty popular, and then I got a bit sick of the guy that was doing it, and I feel like you've got to have a bit of a relationship with the person. I mean, I can't do it without doing a guided thing. I've got really bad tinnitus, so I've got like a mad ringing in my ears. So if it's silent, I'm just like going crazy. in my mind.
You can put different noises on, like ambient noise or something.
Yeah, I had like this app on my phone that had like a monk's bowl. It was like, and then I was like, I don't know if that's worse than the ringing that I've already got in my ears or not. But I think that's it. Like I talk about this with a few people on the podcast before. It's like we live in this world that's just everything is trying to grab our attention just constantly. And it's like going back to the branding thing. It's like I see billboards all the time for things I'm not even going to buy. Like I have an iPhone, I'm probably not going to get an Android, but I see like the new Samsung Galaxy S25 and I'm like, it's just taking my eyes away from everything else in the street. And I know, and I'm aware of it, but it's like just centering yourself and being like, this is all happening around you, but don't get too caught up with it all.
Yeah, I think we're in this, yes, over in information overload. That's where I'd put it. This is something I've think about a lot actually. More recently, I've been coming to terms with a bit better. What did your mate say on the podcast the other day? What would have the world been like if Shakespeare was addicted to Candy Crush?
Yeah,
that was pretty funny. But true, I think about these things, how I spend my time and how I use it. We haven't evolved physiologically over the last 150, 200,000 years, like hardly at all. But now we take in like 100,000 times more information than we ever were designed to do, you know?
So and it's exciting as well. Like it's not like a necessarily completely a bad thing. Like social media is not like you can scroll and be bored, but then just switch it up, like follow other people, see things that you find inspiring. And like we're pretty lucky to live in this age. Yeah, we're destroying the planet, but we're also like full of optimistic and amazing people that are trying to do something about it.
100%. I couldn't agree more. It's everything's perspective. I think fatigue probably sets on more of a negative state of mind with people, but you can always have a positive outlook on it, you know? I'd rather be alive now than in the Victorian age, and I'd rather be getting... My tube might be a bit overcrowded, but there's not horse shit on the streets. You know what I mean? Like, medicine's better than ever. I think what's interesting is like it doesn't mean everything's gonna get better. And there's countries where things are getting worse, you know? As laws getting passed, you know, countries now making the death penalty for homosexuality is like it's just like
the Middle Ages.
Yeah, where you know, with religions from the Iron Ages, this is what they bring. But people want simple answers to complex questions. Conformity sort of prevails on such a large scale. It explains so many things. I've got this really old book. It has a great title. It's called Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And when you understand like groupthink and herd mentality, it explains like so much about the world. And when you understand tribalism and understand your place in it, like it can really help you reassess your situation in society and our situation, how things are where they are, how things could get worse and how things can get better, how you can improve yourself.
What's the book called, sorry?
I mean, this book's a bizarre one. It's not this in itself is not going to be the book to help you, but it's called Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds.
Okay. And
it's a huge fat volume of all of these things through history that is just examples of crowd mentality. So like burning witches, you know? Like just stories about burning witches and things. And it's like there was a time where people thought witches were real. I mean, man, there's places in Africa where they still burn people for witchcraft. But if everyone thinks it and everyone goes along with it, people will just do it, and that's the norm. But yeah, I think so much about our society is based on like the laws of conformity and how people follow each other, and I find it really interesting that more people are like followers than leaders, and you have some people who are very, very creative and individual, and they come up with brilliant ideas, and then once that idea is like set in just enough that it becomes really popular, then like all of these people will follow this idea that previously wasn't, but it's now a societal norm. And then like it's just like fashion, like everything changes, like what's cool or not. Like, have you seen, like, here's a good example. I said to Nyanka, my girlfriend, the other day, we saw like just some lads in the cinema, and they just have those, those little shoulder bags, and they're like, if anyone who lives in London, if it's not just London now, anyone who lives in the UK will know the little roadman look.
The roadman
right?
bag.
And it's like the little
Louis Vuitton.
roadman dope bag, yeah? Like these little square leather bags, full leather bags, that look like you're like a B-Tech drug dealer, basically. Like they're like, but it made me laugh because, when you said, remember when you went on your school trip and saw the 400 Chavas at the swimming pool in Newcastle? Like, there's a time where if a lad came out wearing one of them handbags, like, that was social suicide, man. Like, you never could have done that in the 90s. Like, if you came out and wore a handbag in the 90s, just social suicide. Like, I don't even know what people would have said or done. It's just, you couldn't have done it. Someone did it at some point. Now it's like a uniform to the point where it's like your standard, there was brands of trainers you couldn't have in school or you weren't the cool kid. It's just like, that's like the level it's on. But it's just conformity, There's someone who's going to be the trailblazer and bring in the new ideas. And it's quite hard to do. Like, would you want to wear a cape on the tube? like you're not going to have any drama fitting in. Like, fitting in's easy, and you can do it with panache as a style as well, But it's being a trailblazer. It can be a difficult thing to do, but that's the font of creativity. That's where everything happens, when you cross lines, when you break barriers. And things can go really bad as well, but it's like, this is...
Do you think that's like a kind of human condition that we have built in to kind of follow trends like that? Or do you think that's something that we've particularly adopted in the West?
No, I believe like everything we do, it can relate back to evolutionary biology. Like
the roadman bag.
Yeah. Like, it's
Darwin.
all sexual selection, do I fit in? Am I part of the tribe? Am I part of the culture? Will I be accepted? Find a sexual suitor. To the point where I think creativity is, but it's like your brain can't distinguish the difference. So it's like, even if you've got a wife and kids and you have like successfully done the only thing your brain programmed you to do, which is like, as animals, which we are animals, our only job is to make sure our gene line survives, right? Now, I'm not taking that as a philosophical point because I know that's like hotly contested. Like, you're still a complete valid person, a member of society, no matter what you want to do with your life. I believe that. This is what's brilliant about being a human being. But on a biological level, we're just animals, and you just want to have progeny. You just want to have, recreate yourself on Earth, keep your lineage going. And I think like everything we do to some degree is just attracting that mate, It's just like, it's all this ego stuff, like, why do you play sport? Why do you wear the clothes you do? On some level, it's that. But I don't think we're even like, you can't distinguish it. And then it becomes a point where like our culture, there's so much in our culture that's so fascinating and beautiful and interesting and artistic about these things. And it just doesn't matter regardless. Like, I'm going to make music regardless of the fact that it's like, on some level, being the one on stage is being the bird of paradise with the best dance, I'm sure I think you could look at anything in the world, like any human behavior, and it's just animal behavior. Like, it's just evolutionary biology. It's like, that's why we do it. But that's not why we do it, really. Like, we do it because we love that shit, We do it because it brings meaning to your life. It brings beauty. It makes your existence on Earth more worthwhile. It helps you understand why we're here. Because Edward de Bono, I think, therefore I am, That's the difference to being human, is I might know that on some level I'm an animal, and this is the biological impulse. But I get to think and realise that it is. There's a lot of people that don't realise that that's what they're doing, They seem to be a lot closer to the animals than some people are. But like, yeah, that's the beauty of being human, is that we can make those decisions.
So where do you think it's going to go from here? Do you think we will kind of become more tribal, become more connected into smaller groups? Actually, I read a book a couple of years back called Tribe. Have you heard of it? By Sebastian Junger. He's a documentary filmmaker that was also in the military. I think he did a documentary in Afghanistan. I can't remember the name, but this book's all about tribe, and he kind of looks into going back centuries, like how we've lived through different tribes. And there was like these people, like when America was being colonized by the Europeans, there was Europeans that were captured by the Native American Indians, and then they would be freed by the Europeans, but then they'd be like, I don't want to live this lifestyle, and go back to live with their captors, because they were like, this is
Their culture now.
Yeah, this
Or
like,
Stockholm Syndrome on the two.
Yeah. Well, no, just living as part of a tribe and living where you kind of, everyone that you interact with, and you're kind of, you feel like a much stronger part of something.
The thing is always transient, and it will always move and evolve, and that's the beauty of human civilization and society, is that this is never going to be a fixed answer. It's always always in stasis. I don't know, it could be controversial. There's things that people don't want to talk about. Identity politics is a huge issue, like I sort of said. We're going through a revolution of most Western people, westernized people, and you see in our country especially, since we were born in like very recent decades, people have thrown away the tribes of theology and theocracy. So the world isn't divided into the Christian world, the Muslim world, the Hindu world. These religious sort of frameworks are breaking down massively. So you're having places where free thought can prevail, and you're having societies where they're secular and we believe in multiculturalism and pluralism like our own. And then we have societies that still want to live in the old framework of theocracy and religious rule. And that's the next clash, because wars used to be fought. It used to be your religious wars or your national wars, And the next fight is freedom of thought versus theology. And it's the war that the most politically incorrect war you could have, And the reason is because we still have tribalism, and we still have people who are bigoted, and the concept of the outsider or the other is still so prevalent in so much human psychology that you have to reach an intellectual level, or you have to be raised by people who are not inhibited by these sort of fears, or people who don't understand that different people have different cultures and what they're like, and that's not a problem. I mean, my general thing is like, don't ever judge anyone on what they can't change about themselves, If you can't change anything, like where you were born, what your skin color is, your sexuality, anything like that, if you can't change it, I'll not judge you on that. But I can judge you on everything else, Where that line gets really blurry is like, if someone then is born into a culture that I think's wrong, or I think is acting wrong, say you're born into a culture that oppresses homosexuality. I don't believe in that. I think everyone should have the same rights. I think women and homosexuals should have the same rights as everyone else in society, which is a very modern view. It's only happened within the last few decades, if it's happened at all yet, Now, I can still accept that you can't change that you come from that culture, but you got to get with the times, man. That's the phrase, isn't it? You got to get with the times. And now we're in a bizarre situation of people giving sort of this sort of being fake, to the sense of fake acceptance and wanting to sound morally superior to people without actually caring about these issues, People will be happy to say something. They'll be happy to call the guy in Newcastle, the racist moron, you know. They don't really want to deal with female genital mutilation in the sort of Middle East, you know. They don't want to deal with honour killing. They want to deal with that as a societal issue, you know. And that's the sort of bizarre parallel we're living in. I think we need to promote freedom of thought, and we need to use all of this information we have to have a society that is more more intellectual than anything. I'd love to look back and like us all to just be like so stupid. I'd love for people to understand all the technology they use. I think people should be more scientifically literate. I think it should be more artistically literate. I think like we should hope to have a society that's so egalitarian where you're never judged on all the tribes. They're just interesting quirks about your personality. Like me being a Geordie, you know. I'd hope I'm not being judged for being a Geordie in any regard. It's just matter of fact and a quirk that I have a different accent to you. But then it's just how we interact together and live together and what we strive for. And I think we need to work out what the common goals are. And I think the common goals for me is definitely just what I just said, you know, to live. I think the systematic oppression and repression of women and homosexuals which is massively changing like our country and notable other countries, and has got worse in other countries around the world. That's going to be an interesting battle for the foreseeable future. But I'm maybe too idealistic or naive that I always think good ideas are going to win in the end.
Sometimes they do.
History doesn't actually teach us that necessarily, but I'd like to think that like really bad ideas just can't survive that long, you know. That's a random rant, wasn't it? What do you say? What do I see the future being? I mean,
what's
I just
the future
took
going to be in the sense of becoming more tribal again, or wanting to feel like we're part of a tribe? Because we're kind of in this, whether we're in it or we're coming out of the other side of it, of people being much more individualistic, if that's even a word. Kind of, you've got the YouTube vlogger is like a massive aspiration for young people, and that's, you don't need a tribe, you do all of it. You're the presenter, the shooter, the editor, the promoter. And I just wonder if people are perhaps seeing the benefits and the potential of working together as a team again.
Okay, so I see it as like there's like healthy tribes and unhealthy tribes. So what I think, let's take like a classic example, like I said, is like you have your religious tribe, you have your national tribe. And like nationalism, as we know, can be very dangerous. Now, everything's tribal though. So I used to think, I'm not as tribal because I'm not like...
Because I don't have tribal tattoos.
Because I don't have tribal tattoos, you know what I mean? I'm not this. But then like I'm just was part of smaller tribes. I really like hip hop, I really like rollerblading. But they're not that dangerous of a tribe, you know? Your YouTube vlogger, that's another tribe, but it's an international one. So you can be, it doesn't take into account these characteristics that are necessarily negative, you know? Unless you're in a really niche tribe that's like is hurting other people, you know? If you're vlogging about like fox hunting or something, that's not a great little one to be in. But like, I think in general, I think it's great to have tribes of people will all naturally form into different groups of the sort of their music tastes, their fashion, all these things, and I don't think you can get rid of that, and I think that you should never try to. I think that's great to have these groups, because in these cultures, like, amazing creative things come out of them. You know, you get great music, fashion from youth has like an energy and a power that just nothing can stop the will of the youth, you know? There will always be people who are ingenious trailblazers and just they haven't started to conform enough that they're just so uninhibited by like societal laws that it will always be creation from the youth and youth cultures and subcultures. So I think what we need is the tribal nature has to shift, national lines. Not the, nationalism actually used to be a really left-wing thing before it was turned into what it was. There's nothing necessarily like wrong about identifying from the country you're from, especially when it relates, like, we can have interesting conversations about your culture and your language, and I take pride in the English language and I love using it and studying it, but it's, as long as you're not using it for negative consequences. What we need to redefine what these tribes are, what it means. There's a classic thing, and I used to definitely think this when I was younger, like the whole, you can't be proud to be English. Like, think of what, like, when you see like a Jamaican flag in London, you probably know they got some like banging jerk chicken there. Like, these guys are like, they're proud to be Jamaican. Beats. They love their culture. They got great music, dancing, personality, there's food, everything you associate with it, and they'll wave that flag proudly. We see like the St. George Cross, the connotations are completely different. It's like different type of nationalism. That's this superiority, or I think I'm better because I'm British. What we need to change our tribes to be is change to the healthy parts of our culture, You should be proud of the English language and the amazing authors we have. And we should be proud of British music, and not in a superior sense, in a way of like, we've had all the, because you didn't make the records, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't in the Clash, but I can tell someone, I can tell someone about London Calling if they've never heard it before. Like, you can be proud of your culture, to share it and propagate it in a healthy way. And I think we just need to redefine these boundaries of what the tribes are and how we interact with them. There's some of them that need to be wiped off the face of the earth, though. And that's me and my tribe saying that now,
Well, it feels hopeful. It feels positive. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I think
we're in an interesting age. There's a lot of changes that are going on and have yet to go on, I think.
I'm an optimistic nihilist. I think everything in life is a paradox, myself included. And I hope for the best. But we're on a rock floating in space. And really, in a few million years, we'll not even be recognizable as the species we are now. So does it even really matter?
Oh, on that note. It is an interesting way to think about it, isn't it? When you think about the bigger, you're just like, really does it matter?
Yeah, but what does matter is we have this one life. And if we're going to spread these genes, we can be part of cultural evolution, We'll never be a part of biological evolution. It happens far too slow. But the way we talk, the things we do, the things we share, the things we value, influence everyone around you and everything on a daily basis. And as cultures, we can make huge changes. And I think there's things that give me huge senses of hope. Like I said, the what's happened in my lifetime for women homosexuals, and right now what's happened for transgenders, like how these issues are being discussed and talked about. Some of them aren't being discussed in sensible ways at all, actually, which is part of the problem. But the steps forward that have been happening is going to change everything. And like someone like Malala Yousafzai, just trying to get women education. If you educate women, your entire society improves, and that's just worldwide. You can prove that anywhere it's ever happened. There's no society where the women have been educated and have been given more freedom, and the society's got worse. It depends on what your take on it is. I'm sure there's some men who disagree with that statement, but it depends what you want out of your society, If you want a healthier, more educated society with less infant death or whatever you call it, and
mortality rate.
Infant mortality, sorry, that's what I was looking for, and longer lifespans and more culture, give people rights, give people freedom in that regard. So I think that's what we should strive for.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for
We haven't even
sharing
talked about
everything.
music, like, at all.
Oh, no.
How long have we been going? Like,
Hour and 20. What have you got coming up? You got your radio show.
yeah. I do a radio show on a radio station called Music Box UK in Music Box Radio in London. So that's cool.
Where can people find you on the web?
I'm on the internet.
Spotify?
Yeah, I'm HJJ. That is my artist name. So if you go on to a music service such as Spotify or Apple Music, just put HJJ. If you want to find me on anything else, social media, Insta, Twitter, SoundCloud, my website, just HJJ all day.
HJJ all day.
Simple as that.
I'll stick some links in the in the description as well. Dude, thank you so much. I've had a really good time chatting about
Yeah, man. Thank
all
you.
this random stuff.
All sorts
I'm
of
going
stuff.
to go home and read some books.
I think that's if we leave it on one thing, a lot of people seem to worry about how much they use social media and time spent on it and how it's impacting them. The simplest thing you can do is like just take a book in your bag everywhere, you know? And I mean, I'm on the underground a lot, so I don't have signal. Just read a book. Really fun. I don't care what it's about, you know? I don't care. It's up to you. That's the book. The books choose you, you know? The books choose you. You don't choose them.
And there you go. And we'll let's do another podcast soon and chat about music and stuff.
Hell
Because
yeah.
we didn't even get to it.
Didn't even get started on it. Thank you so much, Emil.
Cheers, man. Catch you soon.
Big up.
Yes, absolutely smashed it. What a sick episode. Massive shouts to Henry for jumping on the podcast, and we have queued ourselves up nicely to come back and do a second one. I will link all of the relevant stuff that we chatted about in the description, so you can find links there along with other bits of Henry's work and his social media and stuff like that. If you enjoyed this episode and you fancy subscribing in iTunes, that would be a massive help. Or even share it with your mates. I can hear another plane coming over the car, so I'm just going to shut up now and end it. See you next time. Bye.